Okay, so like, have you ever had that feeling where you think you understand something,
Uh-huh.
but then like when you try to explain it to someone else,
Yeah.
you're like, oh wait, maybe I don't really get that as well as I thought I did.
It's the Feynman technique or whatever.
Right, exactly. Like,
Yeah.
if you can explain it to a genius,
Yeah.
to like a super smart
To a
person,
5-year-old, right?
yeah, to a 5-year-old,
Yeah.
to anyone really,
Yeah.
that's when you know you've really like nailed it.
You got it.
And so I think that's what we're going to try to do today
Okay.
in this deep dive.
All right.
We're diving into Stephen Covey's
The 7 Habits.
7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
It's a classic.
It's a classic.
Yeah.
And it's like one of those books that I think so many people
Have on their shelf.
have on their shelf, have like maybe even
Yeah.
started reading,
Yeah, probably underlined a few things.
underlined a few things,
Mm-hmm.
but have we like really internalized it?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
have we gotten to that genius level of understanding? So that's our mission today, to like really unpack these principles
Okay.
for effectiveness and personal growth and see if we can't like
Absolutely.
get to that next level with it,
I love it.
you know?
Yeah.
And what I really appreciate of this book is that it covers
So much ground.
so much ground. Yeah, like it's not just about
It's your personal,
professional, how you interact with
family leadership,
your communication,
inner self.
your inner self. Yeah, all of it.
Mm.
So where do we even begin with this?
Well, I think one of the most fundamental things that Covey talks about
Oh.
is this distinction between what he calls the personality ethic and the character ethic.
Okay, personality versus
Which-
character.
Right. And he kind of makes this historical observation that like
Yeah.
for the first 150 years or so of success literature in America,
Mhm.
the emphasis was really on character development,
Okay.
like integrity,
Okay.
humility, fairness, courage, you know, the core principles.
Like the solid foundation.
Right, the bedrock.
Yeah.
But then there was this kind of shift that happened
Uh-huh.
towards what he calls the personality ethic.
So this is more recent.
Yeah, this is more like 20th century stuff where it became about
Okay.
techniques and kind of quick fixes and, you know.
And like the how-tos,
Exactly. The how to,
the life hacks.
the life hacks, right?
Yeah.
So like positive mental attitude,
Okay.
communication skills, you know, image management.
Like how to present yourself.
Yeah, the packaging rather than the substance.
Oh, so it's like putting a nice shiny coat of paint
Exactly.
on something that might be
A little bit,
a little bit rough underneath.
a little rough around the edges, yeah.
Right, right. Which, you know, on the surface
Yeah.
can be appealing.
Sure, it can get you some short-term wins.
Right. But long term,
Not so much.
not so much.
Not so much.
So is he saying that this personality ethic is like completely bad?
No, he's not saying it's bad. It's just that he sees it as being
Okay.
incomplete, right? It's like focusing on the leaves and branches
Right.
of a tree without really paying attention to the roots.
roots.
Right. And if the roots aren't strong,
Yeah.
eventually that tree is going to wither.
It's going to fall over.
It's going to fall over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Covey, he gives this really interesting example
Oh, yeah.
from his own life
But his son.
with his son. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that.
So he had a son who was kind of struggling in a lot of different areas,
Okay.
like school and, you know, socially and with sports.
Like just kind of all around,
yeah,
not really thriving.
not really thriving.
Yeah.
And he and his wife were like, you know, good parents are trying to help him. They're giving him all the, you know, encouragement.
Yeah, all the pep talks,
You can do it. You're great. You know,
like all the things that
like all the things that you're supposed to do.
that you read in the parenting books.
Right.
Yeah.
But it wasn't working.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So even though they were like doing all the right things, quote unquote,
Yeah.
it wasn't actually having the desired effect.
No. And in fact, it seemed like maybe it was even making things worse.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, because you know you think you're doing the right thing, you're
Right.
trying to be supportive,
Yeah.
but you're actually maybe inadvertently communicating
Like a lack of,
a lack of faith in the child.
yeah, like you don't actually believe in them.
Right.
So what was the turning point for them?
Well, what Covey realized was that their own perception of their son
Okay.
was kind of the problem.
So it wasn't the son's behavior.
Right.
It was their perception of the behavior.
Yeah, they had this kind of subconscious belief that he was somehow behind or inadequate.
Oh, so even though they were saying all the right things,
Yeah.
they weren't really believing it themselves.
Right. And that was coming through.
And the kid could sense that.
Yeah, kids are really good at picking up on that.
They're like little emotional sponges.
Right. They absorb everything.
Wow. So what do?
So they realized that they needed to change their own paradigm.
Okay, now you're using this word paradigm.
Paradigm.
What does that even mean?
So Covey defines a paradigm as basically a map or a model, a frame of reference.
So it's like the lens through which you see the world.
Exactly. It's how we see the world, how we interpret it.
Okay.
It's not necessarily reality itself.
Got it. So it's your interpretation of reality.
Exactly. And he makes this really important point.
Okay.
He says the map is not the territory.
Oh, I like that.
Right. So our paradigms, they can be accurate.
Okay.
Or they can be inaccurate.
Right.
They can be helpful or they can be unhelpful.
So it's kind of like if you're trying to get to Chicago,
Yeah.
but you're using a map of Detroit.
Exactly.
You're going to end up in the wrong place.
You're going to get lost.
Yeah.
No matter how hard you try.
Exactly. Even if you're like really good at reading maps
Right.
and driving fast,
Yeah.
you're just going to get to the wrong destination faster. Yeah, you're just going to be lost more efficiently.
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
So in the case of Covey and his son,
Yeah.
their paradigm was that the son was
Was the problem.
the problem.
Yeah.
And that paradigm needed to shift.
Exactly. They needed to see him as capable,
As capable.
as having potential,
Yeah.
as being worthy of their love and support.
Unconditionally.
Right.
Okay. So how do they actually go about doing that?
Well, that's a whole other conversation.
Right.
But it involves things like, really listening to him,
Okay.
trying to see the world from his perspective.
Empathizing.
Empathizing, yeah.
Okay.
And ultimately believing in him.
Believing in him.
Yeah.
Okay. So this whole idea of paradigms, it's like super important.
It's fundamental.
Yeah.
Because it really shapes how we interact with the world.
Right.
And how successful we are.
So if we have a flawed paradigm,
Yeah.
then we're going to keep running into problems,
You're going to keep hitting your head against the wall.
even if we're working really hard. Right. So the first step is to like really examine our paradigms
Absolutely.
and see if they're actually serving us.
And be willing to shift them
But shift them. Yeah.
when necessary.
Okay. So this brings us to one of Covey's like most famous ideas,
The inside-out approach.
the inside-out approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
So the inside-out approach is basically this idea that
Okay.
real change starts with ourselves.
Yeah.
It starts with our own character, our own paradigms, our own motives.
So not trying to change other people,
Right. Not trying to change the external world first.
but changing yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for example, if you want to have a happy marriage,
Okay.
the inside-out approach would say,
Okay.
focus on being the kind of person
Okay.
who creates a happy marriage.
So be the change you want to see.
Exactly.
Mm.
Rather than trying to get your spouse to change
Right.
or trying to change the circumstances.
Okay. So it's like taking responsibility for your own happiness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And your own contribution to the situation.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
So it's not about like blaming other people
Right.
or circumstances,
Right.
but it's about like looking inward and saying, okay,
Yes, and I do.
what can I do to make this better?
Exactly. And Covey, he uses this phrase, private victories precede public victories.
Private victories precede public victories.
Mm.
Okay, break that down for me.
So private victories are all about self-mastery.
Okay.
It's about, developing your own character,
Okay.
being able to keep commitments to yourself,
Okay.
being disciplined,
So like the inner work.
the inner work,
Yeah.
right? And public victories are things like,
Okay.
successful relationships,
Okay.
achieving your goals,
So like the outward.
the outward manifestations
Yeah.
of that inner work.
Okay. So you can't really have the public victories
Yes.
without the private victories.
You got to build that foundation.
You got to build that foundation.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've talked about the personality ethic versus the character ethic
Yeah.
paradigms, the inside-out approach. Private victories, public victories, all of this is like really foundational stuff.
Yeah, this is the groundwork
Yeah.
for the 7 habits.
Okay, so where do the habits actually come in?
So the 7 habits, they're basically a set of principles and practices
Okay.
that help us to live a more effective life.
Okay.
And they build on all of this foundational stuff that we've been talking about.
Okay.
So the first habit
Yeah.
is be proactive.
Be proactive. Okay. This is a word that gets thrown around a lot.
It does.
So what does it actually mean in the context of Covey's work?
So for Covey, being proactive means
No.
more than just taking initiative.
Oh.
It's about recognizing that we have the power to choose our response
To any given situation.
to any given situation,
Yeah.
regardless of the circumstances.
So it's not just about like being busy.
Right.
It's about being intentional.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about understanding that there's a space between stimulus and response.
Okay.
And in that space, we have the freedom to choose.
So it's like that pause.
That pause,
Yeah.
that moment where you can say, okay,
Okay.
what's my best course of action here?
Rather than just reacting.
Rather than just knee-jerk, emotional.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So how do we actually cultivate that proactivity?
Well, Covey talks about this idea of the circle of concern
Okay, the circle of concern.
versus the circle of influence.
Okay, so what's the difference?
So the circle of concern is all the things that we care about,
Okay.
but that we can't really control.
So like the weather,
Yeah, the weather,
politics,
the economy,
other people's behavior.
other people's behavior. Right.
All the things that we stress about.
Exactly.
That we have no control over.
Right. And then the circle of influence is the things that we can control.
Okay.
Our own thoughts,
Okay.
our own actions,
Our attitudes.
our attitude, our behavior.
Okay.
So the key to being proactive is to focus on our circle of influence.
Okay, so focus on what you can control
Exactly.
rather than what you can't. Okay, that makes sense.
And what's interesting is that when we focus on our circle of influence, it actually expands.
Oh, that's interesting. So the more proactive you are,
Yeah.
the more you can actually influence.
Exactly.
Okay.
And he gives this great example of like an executive who has this like really controlling boss.
Oh.
And the executive is always complaining about the boss,
Yeah.
but he can't really control the boss.
Right, the boss is the boss.
Right. So Covey says, okay, instead of focusing on the boss,
Yeah.
focus on your own work.
Okay.
Focus on doing the best job you can.
Yeah.
Focus on being proactive.
Anticipating the boss's needs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what happens is that over time,
Yeah.
this executive, he starts to gain more influence.
Because he's so good at what he does.
Yeah, because he's reliable, he's competent, he's proactive,
He's valuable.
he's
yeah.
valuable.
Yeah.
And so even though he can't control the boss directly,
Right.
he's able to influence the situation.
By controlling what he can control.
Exactly.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
So it's like that old saying,
Grant me the serenity,
to accept the things I cannot change.
the courage to change the things I can.
And the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah, exactly.
So habit 1, be proactive.
Yeah,
Focus on your circle of influence.
right.
Okay, what's habit 2?
Habit 2 is begin with the end in mind.
Begin with the end in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so this sounds kind of like a planning thing.
It is a planning thing,
Like,
but it's more than that.
okay.
It's about really understanding what you want your life to be about,
Okay.
what your values are, what your goals are,
So like your big picture,
your big picture,
your purpose.
your purpose.
Right.
Okay.
And Covey, he talks about this idea of developing a personal mission statement.
A personal mission statement.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is that?
So a personal mission statement is basically
Okay.
a document that outlines
Okay.
your values,
Yeah.
your goals, your purpose.
Like your guiding principles.
Exactly. It's like your own personal constitution.
Okay. I like that. Yeah.
So it's something that you can refer back to
Yeah.
when you're making decisions.
To make sure you're staying on track.
Yeah, to keep you aligned with
Exactly.
your values,
With your true north.
with your true north. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you actually go about creating this mission statement?
Well, Covey's, he suggests a few different exercises.
Okay.
Like one of them is to imagine your own funeral.
Okay, that's a little bit morbid,
It is a little morbid,
but I get it.
but the idea is to think about
Yeah.
what you would want people to say about you.
Like, what's your legacy?
What's your legacy?
Yeah. What do you want to be remembered for?
Exactly.
Okay.
And another exercise is to imagine your
Yeah.
25th or 50th wedding anniversary
Okay.
and think about what you would want your spouse to say about you.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So, like, what kind of partner do you want to be?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
what kind of relationship do you want to have built?
Okay, so these exercises, they're really about getting you to think long term,
Big picture.
big picture about what really matters.
Exactly.
Okay.
And once you have that clarity,
Yeah.
then you can start to make decisions
That are aligned.
that are aligned
Yeah.
with your values.
Okay. So habit 2, begin with the end in mind.
Yeah.
Develop a personal mission statement.
Know where you're going.
Know where you're going.
Yeah.
All right. What about habit 3?
Habit 3 is put first things first.
Put first things first.
Yeah.
Okay. So this sounds like a time management thing.
It is a time management thing.
Okay.
But again, it's more than that. It's
Yeah.
about living your life in
Yeah.
alignment with your values.
So it's about taking that mission statement
Exactly.
that we just talked about
Yeah.
and actually putting it into practice.
Putting it into action
Yeah.
on a daily basis.
Okay. So how do we do that?
Well, Covey, he introduces this tool called the time management matrix.
The time management matrix.
Yeah. Okay.
And basically, it's a way of categorizing.
Our tasks and activities
Okay.
based on 2 criteria:
Okay.
urgency and importance.
Urgency and importance.
So you have 4 quadrants.
4 quadrants.
Quadrant 1 is urgent and important.
Okay.
So those are things like crises, deadlines,
Like putting out fires.
putting out fires. Yeah.
Yeah.
Quadrant 2 is not urgent but important.
Okay. Not urgent, but important.
So those are things like planning,
Okay.
relationship building, personal development,
But like the long-term stuff.
the long-term stuff. Yeah.
Important, but not urgent stuff.
Exactly. Quadrant 3 is urgent but not important.
Okay. Urgent, but not important.
So those are things like interruptions,
Okay.
some meetings.
Other people's priorities.
Yeah, other people's priorities.
Okay.
And then quadrant 4 is not urgent and not important.
So that's like the time wasters.
The time wasters, yeah.
Social media.
Social media, Netflix.
Netflix, yeah.
All that good stuff.
Okay. So the key here is to spend most of our time
In quadrant 2.
in quadrant 2.
Yeah.
Not urgent, but important.
Exactly.
But that's so hard
It is hard.
because like we're so busy
Yeah.
and there's always something urgent that comes up.
And our brains are wired for urgency.
Yeah.
You know, dopamine hits.
Right. We get that little rush
Yeah.
from like checking things off our list,
Exactly.
even if those things aren't actually that important.
Right.
So how do we break out of that cycle?
Well, Covey, he talks about the importance of
Okay.
having a principle center.
The principle center.
Yeah, which is basically like having a strong set of values
Okay.
that guides your decisions.
So it goes back to that mission statement.
It goes back to the mission statement, yeah. And he also talks about the importance of willpower.
Willpower.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it takes willpower to say no to the urgent things,
To the distractions.
to the distractions,
Yeah.
and to focus on the important things.
Okay. So it's about being disciplined.
Being disciplined, being intentional,
Yeah.
and having that long-term vision in mind,
That end in mind.
that end in mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've covered the first 3 habits.
Yeah.
Be proactive.
Yeah.
Begin with the end in mind. Put first things first.
These are the habits of private
The
victory.
habits of private victory.
Yeah.
So they're all about like
Self-mastery.
self-mastery. Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting your own house in order,
Building that foundation.
building that foundation.
Yeah.
Okay. So once we've mastered those, then we can move on to the habits of public victory,
Exactly.
which are about
relationships.
relationships,
Teamwork, collaboration.
all the things that involve other people.
Exactly.
Okay. So before we dive into those,
Yeah.
I want to touch on something that you mentioned earlier.
Okay.
This idea of efficiency versus effectiveness.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, because I think sometimes we get so caught up
Inefficiency?
in efficiency
Yeah.
that we forget about effectiveness.
Right. We're so focused on like doing things right
Yeah.
that we forget about doing the right things.
Doing the right things exactly.
Yeah.
And Covey gives this example
Oh, yeah, the son.
with his son. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
So his son was like a very efficient person.
Okay.
He had his whole day scheduled out
Like down to the minute.
down to the minute. Yeah.
Okay.
And he even had scheduled in a phone call to break up with his girlfriend.
Oh, wow.
Like it was just another item on his to-do list.
Like a task to be completed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, the call ended up taking way longer
And he had planned.
than he had planned
Yeah.
because relationships are messy.
That's not efficient.
They're not efficient.
Yeah.
You can't just schedule them in.
You can't just like check them off your list.
Exactly.
Right. So what's the takeaway from that story?
Well, I think the takeaway is that
Okay.
when it comes to people,
Yeah.
we need to prioritize effectiveness over efficiency.
Effectiveness over efficiency.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's more important to build strong relationships.
Yeah.
To really listen to people. Yeah.
To understand their needs,
To be present.
to be present,
Yeah.
than it is to just like get things done quickly.
Okay, so it's not about like rushing through our interactions. It's
Right.
about actually connecting,
Connecting.
being authentic.
Being authentic.
Yeah.
Okay. And this kind of leads us into another one of Covey's big ideas.
The PC balance.
The PPC balance.
Yeah.
Okay, what is that?
So PPC stands for production
Production
versus production
Yeah.
capability.
production capability.
Yeah. Okay. And Covey, he uses this analogy of the goose that lays the golden eggs.
Oh yeah, I've heard of this.
Yeah. So the golden eggs represent
Right.
the
Right.
results that we want.
The results. Yeah.
The profits, the achievements, the whatever.
Okay.
And the goose represents
Okay.
our ability to produce those results.
So like our health,
Our health,
well-being,
well-being,
our relationships.
our skills,
I remember
knowledge,
that.
our capacity. So the PC balance is about, okay.
Making sure that we're not just focused on getting the golden eggs,
Okay.
but that we're also taking care of the goose.
Taking care of the goose.
Okay. Because if we kill the goose,
Yeah.
we're not going to get any more golden eggs.
We're going to be in trouble.
Going to be in trouble.
Right. So it's about sustainability.
Sustainability.
Yeah.
Long-term thinking.
Long-term thinking. Okay. So give me an example of what this looks like in real life.
Okay. So let's say you're working on a big project.
Okay.
And you're really stressed out.
Yeah.
You're working long hours.
Burning the candle at both ends.
Burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah.
You're not sleeping enough.
Not eating well.
Not eating well.
Yeah.
You're neglecting your relationships.
Yeah.
You're basically sacrificing your health and well-being
To get the project done.
to get the project done.
Right.
So in that case, you're focused on the golden eggs.
The golden eggs.
Yeah.
The project. But you're neglecting the goose. You're neglecting the goose.
Your well-being.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so what's going to happen?
You're going to burn out.
You're going to burn out.
Yeah.
You're going to get sick.
You're not going to be able to sustain it.
You're not going to be able to sustain it.
Right. So the PC balance is about finding that sweet spot
Okay.
where you're
Taking care of yourself.
taking care of yourself,
Yeah.
still getting things done,
Still producing results,
but not at the expense of your well-being.
not at the expense of the goose.
Not at the expense of the goose, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've talked about the personality ethic versus the character ethic,
Yeah.
paradigms, the inside-out approach,
Mm-hmm.
private victories, public victories,
Yeah.
efficiency versus effectiveness,
Right.
the PPAC balance,
The goose.
the goose,
Finding the golden egg.
the golden eggs.
Yeah.
And all of this is just like scratching the surface
Of Covey's work.
of Covey's work.
Right.
There's so much more to explore.
There is
But I think this gives us a really good foundation
a solid foundation to
Yeah.
build on.
to build on.
Yeah.
And I love that suggestion that Covey makes
Oh, yeah.
about reading the book
Yeah.
with the intention of teaching it to someone else
Within 48 hours.
within 48 hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think that really forces you to like
Engage with the material.
engage with the material on a deeper level
Absolutely.
and to really understand it.
Because you have to be able to explain it.
You have to explain it to someone else.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's how you really learn something.
That's how you achieve that genius level of understanding.
Yeah.